Happy Halloween, everybody. We are finally here to the season, to my favorite month of the year. If it were up to me, every month of the year would be October. That the best way to really kick off the spooky season is to nitpick a listicle from a mainstream entertainment publication. So if you haven't heard, Variety released a top 100 list of the best horror movies of all time in their judgment. And it has sent the online horror community into what I can only describe as a tizzy. People are arguing and debating about the merits of this list, and just kind of like from all angles. Like, does this list elevate this genre enough? Does this list overlook these films? What, they ranked that near the bottom? What, that was ranked over this? Oh my God! It's a great conversation that we get to have every single time any one of these, again, mainstream publications, voices anything about this genre, this space that we all love so much. So I just wanted to go over this list and to give my 2 cents, even though my opinion is worth even less than 2 cents. But I wanted to go through this list, see how justified I think it is, see where I line up with the people at Variety, and where I disagree. Speed 2 full sequence. Fuck all those movies. I just have no interest, no intention of ever sitting down with any of those movies. Just the statements I hear from the director, the fact that a man who considers himself to be this provocateur has relied on the same idea for over a decade now. I know he has a film that's basically trapped in post-production, but I have no patience for the Human Centipede. And we get to our first Hammer horror film, hopefully not the last of the list. Horror of Dracula, the breakthrough movie for Hammer Studios. Really defines the archetype. Well, I guess maybe Curse of Frankenstein was really the breakthrough, but for me, this was my introduction to Hammer Studios. This to me sets the archetypes for what Hammer does best. Christopher Lee as Dracula, Peter Cushing as Van Helsing. This is as classic as Hammer Studios gets. It's not my favorite Hammer film. It's not my favorite Hammer Dracula film. I like it when they start to push the envelope even more with, some of their more adult content, let's say. But a very worthy addition to this list. The original, The Vanishing, the only Vanishing to be acknowledged. I know there are some defenders of the remake out there. I will admit, this is a movie that is made by the ending. If not for the last 2 or 3 minutes, I'm really not sure how much of an impression The Vanishing would make. It's an effective thriller. It's a very chilling movie, but that final scare, if you want to call it that, my God. The original Village of the Damned, don't know if it's worthy of being on this list, much less being above some definitely more classic, more substantial films. Reanimator, yes, it deserves to be on this list, but it's better as a comedy. I think most people would admit that. And I lament the fact that there's almost no chance that From Beyond is going to get on the list. But Reanimator, definitely the best, my favorite adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft. One of my favorite Stuart Gordon films. Great to see it, and great to see David Gale's severed head on the platter there. Now we're talking. 81. The original The Wolfman. One of my gateway drugs into horror. What a remarkably atmospheric and really surprisingly cerebral monster movie. I think a lot of people wouldn't have the patience for The Wolfman today. I mean, you don't get the typical lycanthropic shenanigans that you would hope for. There's not really this big set piece of werewolf carnage. There's not even really a standout transformation scene. It is just about the duality of man and beast, It is just classic from beginning to end. I think Lon Chaney Jr. gives the performance of his career as Lawrence Talbot in this original film. So yes, 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 yes. Vincent Price's The House of Wax. Don't love this one. I kind of prefer the remake, the Paris Hilton one. But the more Vincent we get on this list, the better. The original The Omen, can't comment on that, haven't seen it. The Blob, beware, he leaps and creeps across the floor. Yeah, I'm super happy to see the Blob here. I now feel a personal kinship to the movie because I've been attending the Colonial Theater in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, which is the theater of the famous mob running out scene from this original movie, The Blob. Creature from the Black Lagoon. I would not put that above the Wolfman. I guess it's more iconic than the Wolfman at this point. The Gillman is very iconic, and now we have we have a remake or a reboot, I think, coming from James Wan, from his company. So I guess the Creature fans have won, and I just watched it the other night, and it is, it's a fun time. It just doesn't have the substance, the psychological underpinning of the Wolfman, but not gonna get too upset about it. Fuck yeah, Near Dark. Honestly, I want this even higher. I need this movie to get the love it deserves. It's been in the shadows, pun intended, for so long. It's finally starting to emerge. At least it's found a home on some streaming services. People can see it, people can watch it, and people can realize that Near Dark and not The Lost Boys was the best vampire movie to come out in 1987. The Sixth Sense deserves to be even higher. I think The Sixth Sense is one of those, is it really a horror movie debates that I think is so useless. It's so not productive. It is at its most effective when it is a drama about a troubled child and his relationship to his mother and his psychologist. But make no mistake that this is a damn effective ghost story. I still think it represents the finest of Shyamalan's writing and directing. I think he was so on his game here. Not that he hasn't made movies since that I also admire, but call me basic, this is still my number one Shyamalan. Sorry, Unbreakable fans. The Babadook. A lot of people are sick of The Babadook. I'm not one of them. I have no need to rewatch it, because once was enough, thank you. I was in a real state of both grief and terror for, the next day or two after seeing this film, and wow. That kid is annoying, but I also feel for him, just like I feel for the mother. Jennifer Kent needs to be someone who is a prolific artist that is not just defined by The Babadook. The Nightingale was just that same 1-2 punch of trauma and terror. So yeah, put The Babadook on this list. Fuck yeah. And sorry to all the haters, but yeah, The Babadook all the way. The original Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Crazy to think that in one of the first Academy Awards ceremonies, the Best Actor award was given to Frederick March for playing Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. We think of the Academy as so anti-genre, and they are usually, but in this early instance, they got it right. Goddamn Frederick March, he still freaks me out in this movie. Almost 100 years later, something about his Mr. Hyde really gets under my skin, really agitates me, and deeply unsettles me. And this was a quiet pioneering movie. It was a quietly pioneering movie for special effects, for pushing boundaries. This is a pre-Hays Code movie, and it really shows. So yeah, kudos for getting that on the list. Candyman needs to be even higher. I think we're all just really continuing to appreciate what a film this is. Um, it's one of the most layered horror movies of, I would say, the last 50 years. You know, social commentary on gentrification, on race, and it's so richly psychological. Two amazing performances from Mr. Tony Todd and from Virginia Madsen. Tony Todd's voice lives in my head rent-free to this day. Lynch truth being spoken at number 53, Eraserhead. It is not just weirdness. It is not just nonsense. This is a really thematic film. I'm tired of this kind of reputation that it's just weird for the sake of weird. Yeah, you have to be patient with it, and you have to prepare yourself for the wild things that it's going to show you. Man, what an unsettling movie. What an atmospheric movie. In some ways, I still think that this might be the most remarkable achievement for David Lynch, because he made it with such a small budget over the course of years, and it turned out as atmospheric as it did. This was a prime influence on The Shining, on Stanley Kubrick for making The Shining. Gojira, hell yeah. Hell to the yeah. Don't even got to justify that. Number 47, to the big G himself. I would love to see even more Godzilla representation on this list, even though this is still the only one you can really classify as a horror film, like in that pure sense. It's a horror film, but I'm not going to argue with it. Now, this made people mad. This made people really mad. Number 46, The Thing. I think that's perfectly reasonable. I'm sorry. All hail John Carpenter, director of some of my favorite genre films. This is the top 100 horror films ever made. I really don't think we need to be outraged that it was only placed at 46. I don't think so. And I think this film is amazing. But we'll see what got placed above it. It does not strike me immediately as unreasonable. Okay, now it's almost like they're trying to be provocative. Number 45, The Invisible Man. I dig this. I don't mean to sound like a contrarian. This is a delightful film. Claude Rains. I think for me, I think something that's really important about me is that something that goes a long way for me in a horror movie is that iconic villain performance. That really can elevate your picture. And there's a lot to love about The Invisible Man already, but Claude Rains' voice as the Invisible Man is just king shit. That's something that The Thing is lacking for me. So I'm sorry, my personal preference kind of is inclined to agree with Variety here. Manhunter. That's cool. I like that. Wouldn't have even thought that it would qualify for this because, it's a thriller, right? It's a serial killer thriller. But at the same time, there's some horrific shit in this movie that makes it a horror film. Vampire. Yeah, this is a really densely atmospheric movie. You might get some skeptics who want more substance from it. Fair, but this is the first major vampire classic to not be based on Bram Stoker's Dracula. You got Nosferatu, you got Bela Lugosi's Dracula. Vampire is the first classic vampire film to not be based on that story of Dracula, and I think it might be the first. I can't remember if it was based on source material. I think it was loosely based on a short story, but in its own way, incredibly pioneering film. 28 Days Later, I'm almost just happy to see this as such a fan of Danny Boyle in general. I'm not a big fan of zombie movies or whatever you want to classify this as, but putting my genre preferences aside, I can still acknowledge what a fine film 28 Days Later is. And also quietly kind of launched the career of Cillian Murphy in a lot of ways. I'm sure this was his introduction to a lot of people. My introduction to him was Batman Begins, but this must have been very big for his career. No argument from me here, except that maybe it should be even higher. Bride of Frankenstein. This to me is still kind of like my ideal just movie. It just has literally everything that I could want in a film is here in perfect execution. I said how a performance can elevate a horror film. Look no further to Boris Karloff, real name William Henry Pratt, to prove the case there. Freaks, the movie that was so good at its job, that understood the assignment so well. It understood the assignment too well, because it basically put Todd Browning in director's jail, because he made a movie that was too terrifying for audiences. I mean, they're like, those reports you hear about Terrifier, people fainting, people vomiting in the audience. Apparently a woman suffered a miscarriage because of this movie. That's at least that's a rumor that's attached to the film. I'm not going to get into the ethics about how, of whether Todd Browning should have cast real freaks, other than to say it did not offend me personally, and I certainly don't hold it against the film's merits. Hereditary, number 36. Moving on, Evil Dead 2, my boy Sam Raimi, his first entry on the list. I'm curious if he will have other movies on the list. Evil Dead might be here, it might be higher, because this is really more of a comedy, if you ask most people. But it is to some people the gold standard of the horror comedy. Not for me, and I suspect my gold standard will be coming up shortly. M. This really, some of these films have been spooky but not terrifying. M really gets past anything that's terrifying, even just in a superficial way, and goes straight to the jugular, straight to the heart. Imagine being Peter Lorre's character. Imagine having that internal voice that drives you to do the terrible things he does. Peter Lorre, what an accomplished career. This might still be the crowning jewel of his career. It certainly is the first thing I think of. Eyes Without a Face. Yeah, cool. I like seeing that film on here. The original Phantom of the Opera. Not my favorite version of this. It's the most iconic. Not surprised to see it here. This was probably the first iconic scare. Like, everyone collectively remembers seeing the Phantom unmasked. It was the first iconic scare that audiences really shared with each other back in the day. So, all the respect in the world to Lon Chaney Sr. What a titan of terror. Is he the first one? Is he the first of his kind? I'm not sure. It's crazy that he died with the silent era. He died of cancer. I believe of throat cancer before he could play Dracula. Creepy stuff. Okay. I know I consider myself a fanboy for the Universal monster movies. I think the original 1931 Dracula is very overrated. I even question the term overrated, because I think we all understand that it's really not an outstanding movie outside of Bela Lugosi's performance. Although it got ranked this high on the list, I assume that Bela Lugosi carried the movie on his back all the way to the 27 slot. But Bela Lugosi made better horror movies. Todd Browning made better horror movies. We already saw one on the list. And this is by no means the best adaptation of Dracula. Scream. The kind of I don't know if this is the Nirvana of horror movies. I mean, because horror was dead when they made Scream, so it didn't kill horror before this. It kind of saved it, but in a weird, perverted way, where now every horror movie has to be meta. Look, this original Scream, amazing film, damn fine film, Halloween season watching, a must watch. one of the most clever scripts ever written for a horror film. Maybe too clever for its own good, especially for, again, what it did to the horror scene. But, you know, I mean, honestly, this gets on the list for Drew Barrymore's scene alone, the opening scene alone. Fuck yeah. The Blair Witch Project. Suck it. All the haters of this film can... I'm not going to say it. Very wise choice. Very wise choice. Does this deserve to be placed higher than The Thing? Yes. Does it deserve to be placed higher than Hereditary? Yes. Just a tectonic shift. A cultural moment that I'm not sure if we'll have something of this magnitude again in the world of horror. Like, yes, Terrifier is making people pass out in theaters. People called the police after they saw this movie because they thought the lead actors had really gone missing. That's how compelling it is and how authentic it was. So you have a lot of Blair Witch skeptics out there. I am not one of them. Carnival of Souls. This is a more savvy list than the complainers led me to believe. I did not think Carnival of Souls would make it this high on the list. Despite being the exquisite film that it is. But, you know, there's some nerdier choices than I... The Shining at number 18. Don't have anything to add about The Shining, except it is, you know, every bit as good as people have said and will continue to say. Halloween at number 16. Man, John Carpenter stans are not having a good day when they read this list. I am a fan, not a stan, and I'm not going to get upset about it being at only number 16. Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror. If this is the highest ranked vampire movie, I'm not going to complain. It is so funny to think that, like, the first time we did a vampire movie, we got it right. And everything after that has technically paled in comparison. It's so funny to me. No other silent movie bodies everything that came after it so profusively, like so definitively that we're acknowledging it in these publications. Really curious if Robert Eggers will challenge Nosferatu. I actually think I prefer the Werner Herzog film. Not prefer maybe, but I think it's really underrated. People should check that out before they check out Robert Eggers' remake. The original Frankenstein. I prefer Bride of Frankenstein. But if you judge things by what's more groundbreaking, it would be the original Frankenstein. The before and after of Frankenstein 31 is insane. Complete tectonic shift. Audition. Can I level with you? Can I just be honest with you? I don't get the Audition hype. I think it must have been a real trip to see it in theaters, but it's not a movie that survives the hype for me, which is what people say about the Blair Witch Project. That people hype it up so much and it just doesn't deliver. Audition it delivers. It's quite a film, but number 7. I'm not there with Audition, but all due respect, right, to such an iconic film. To talk about iconic, Night of the Living Dead. You don't get more iconic than that, really. I mean, it single-handedly made zombies like the thing. Like, without this one movie, you don't have endless zombie movies. So it's crazy what this accomplished with the budget it had, and it still serves as this really great study of, you know, it basically has a microcosm of society. These people, diverse people, hold up in this house, have to work together, and their ignorance gets in the way. So it's still a very poignant film, especially with that ending. Not going to spoil anything, but wow. I was left speechless by this film. Rosemary's Baby, no argument from me. And again, if we're divorcing this from who Roman Polanski is as a person, then this is an obvious top 10 film. Like, any way you look at it, impact, quality, status, clout, it, checks all those boxes. Jaws. Yeah, I think some people will resent this being so high because of how popular it is. It's popular for a reason. You know, the masses got it right with this one. This fucking slaps. And it reinforced the idea that what you don't see is more effective than what you do see, in a way that people are still holding on to. Filmmakers are still holding on to the lessons from Jaws all these years later. Psycho. Yeah, I'm not gonna argue that. The Exorcist. So I'm looking back now, and I'm thinking back to some films that just did not make the list. I thought An American Werewolf in London would definitely make the list. I thought no way they would do Evil Dead 2 but not An American Werewolf in London, and I was wrong. I'm a little disappointed in that. The only justification I will accept is because John Landis is a dumpster fire of a human being. But you have Roman Polanski on the list, so we can't actually judge it by that criteria. All right, The Exorcist, number 2. I think this is the architect of elevated horror. I think, is it the scariest movie still? It depends on who you ask. Is it, I think, in an objective sense, a movie that has been engineered to prey upon the senses and the fears of audiences more effectively than most films? Yes. Hurricane Billy, you are missed. This is not actually my favorite Friedkin film. Sorcerer is. It's a basic answer, basic number 2 for people, but not going to argue with it. And you know what I'm really not going to argue with? Boom. My favorite horror film has made it to number 1, and people are upset about it. People are upset. People are upset that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre beat Halloween. It beat The Thing. Tobe Hooper, the guy who supposedly didn't even direct Poltergeist, he made it to number 1. Toast to that, honestly. Kudos to Variety. Everybody knew TCM would make the top 100. I think it surprised a lot of people, even me, that it made number 1. Look, I think of all the great before and afters of horror, with all the films that have changed it, I think this, above all else, reshaped the landscape of horror. And it redefined the possibilities and the potential of horror. Because here's the thing, unlike The Exorcist, which was a studio-sanctioned film with all of this A-list talent, which is great. It's great to see people of that status participating in horror. This didn't just clear the way for horror films, for a specifically kind of provocative strand of horror films. It cleared the way for independent filmmaking. And I really resent, as a Texan, that I never hear Tobe Hooper brought up in the conversation of people, these indie filmmakers from Texas. He should be there, standing side by side with Richard Linklater. And honestly, the best double feature that I could imagine is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and then Dazed and Confused. That is the representation of Texas that I want. That is the most accurate, all-encompassing representation of Texas that you could hope for. That's all I'm going to say about it. I'm actually pretty happy with this Variety list. There were some films ranked too high, some films ranked too low, some films they should have included, for sure. But what, was I expecting to agree with literally every choice here? For the fact that this is a mainstream publication, and, I would have expected it to just be one obvious choice after another, it turned out to be a savvier list than I anticipated. So kudos to you, Variety. Thank you for the Tobe Hooper supremacy on display here. So that's it, guys. Obviously, let me know in the comments what you think of this list, what you think of my takes. You got to remember, I have terrible taste. I have a bit of a contrarian streak, so I'm sorry if we disagree strongly on some things, but I want to hear your takes. I want to hear the arguments for why TCM should not be number 1. Why should The Thing be number 1? I'm curious to get that conversation going. But if you guys like that content, obviously you know what to do. Hit that like and subscribe series of buttons, and just stay tuned for more content in the future.